Hi, welcome back to my channel. If it's your first time here, please subscribe, and if you like this video, please like and comment. Today I'm going to be talking about American Horror Story and the things that I like about it, the things I don't like about it, kind of just doing my review and analysis of the first 9 seasons. So let's get right into it. Okay, so to start off, I'm going to talk about generally the series and the pros and cons of it, and the things, pretty much the things I like about it and the things I don't like about it. So let's start with the good things. I really like overall the connected anthology format. I think it kind of paved the way for a lot of anthology series that are happening now, like Haunting of Hill House and The Haunting of Bly Manor, where you can have some of the same actors, some new actors, and small connections that really are fun for like the eagle-eyed viewers, but don't take away from the story overall and doesn't make it like kind of sequels, which we all know can be a mess. Yeah, so I like that, but obviously anybody who's watched all 9 seasons knows that sometimes if the connections to the other seasons are too much, can get a little out of control and not so great. So gotta be conscious of that. They have amazing actors in all of the seasons. I mean, Jessica Lange in the first 4 seasons was just fucking phenomenal. Sarah Paulson, Evan Peters, both phenomenal. Leslie Grossman in the last couple seasons, even if I didn't like those seasons, I always loved her character. She's just so much fun and so over the top and so perfect for this show. And there's so many other actors, I can name them all, but those are just some of the ones that come to mind. The one other thing that I really like about the show is that it is a horror show, but it also has comedy in there, and there are a lot of really funny characters and funny moments, and I really enjoy that. And honestly, like, I'm really picky about comedy movies. A lot of the time I just get bored too quickly with them. And that is, so a lot of the time the things that I find the most funny are like the funny moments within horror movies and horror shows. So yeah, I really appreciate that about American Horror Story. Another great thing about American Horror Story are the characters and the way that they build the characters up, and just they're all usually so unique and really fun. And so there's so many characters that whether you love them, whether you hate them, and sometimes that changes throughout a season, they're just entertaining to watch. So that's definitely a big plus for me. Yeah, and like also getting introduced to new actors is always fun, on the topic of acting, which I was previously on. I love the guy who played Richard Ramirez in season 9. Had never seen him before, and I just was he did such a good job. And just a lot of other people. I mean, I knew Billie Lourd actually from Scream Queens, which I personally love. I know it wasn't a huge commercial success, but it's just like all of the campy, ridiculous, over-the-top horror of American Horror Story, but that's it the whole time, and just stupid cultural references and ridiculous. Pretty much, it's like it was based off of Chanel Oberlin, so that should tell you something. And Emma Watson plays essentially Chanel Oberlin in it. So yeah, it's just, if you liked season 3 and you love to hate Chanel, you'll probably like Scream Queens. Let's move into the things I am not so fond of when it comes to American Horror Story. To start, there is some seasons that just didn't do it for me, whether it be the theme or just the characters aren't as interesting for me, or they're just kind of a convoluted mess. Season 8. Yeah, so, you know, or the connections between the different seasons become too much, where it's just like we're revisiting an old season, and I kind of just want to move on a lot of the time. I mean, I love Coven, spoiler for when I talk about each season, but, you know, I don't always want to see a whole season that just ends up being Coven Part 2. Wasn't really what I was hoping for. When they said Apocalypse, I was like, okay, we're gonna fucking see a bunch of crazy shit, and it was like just turned into Coven. It wasn't really, I mean, obviously it was about the apocalypse, but the apocalypse kind of felt like an afterthought. Another thing about the American Horror Story that I am not always super fond of is the fact that the seasons kind of go off the rails a lot of the time towards the end and just get too convoluted and ridiculous, and it's not as entertaining or fun to watch. I mean, it's entertaining to watch, but like when you think back on it, you're like, what the fuck just happened? And then same thing kind of that like sometimes there are a couple really good characters and the rest of the characters are kind of just meh. I saw that happening sometimes a lot with some of the first couple seasons with like Jessica Lange's characters were always amazing and Evan Peters, but then other characters were not as well built, which I just like, especially with like a ensemble cast, I like for all of the characters to be really fleshed out. So the last and the main thing that I do not like about American Horror Story, and actually kept me from watching it for a while, and there are a couple seasons that I've pieced out early on and came back and finished later, or reasons I don't rewatch certain seasons or certain episodes within those seasons, is the gratuitous sexual violence and graphic on screen. And that is, at least in the earlier seasons, was such a huge like kind of thing that happened every single season and sometimes multiple times a season, and it just sometimes is taken way too far. And I think you can, you know, obviously that's a aspect of horror that is horrific, but there's a way to do it that's just better than they have in the past. They are very explicit and graphic with it, and I just, not my cup of tea. Think Implied is a lot better in those kind of circumstances. So yeah, you know, that's one thing that's definitely turned me off to a couple seasons. I'm just like, okay, you know, I'm good. I'll check back on this later. Okay, so next I'm going to be getting into my opinions of each individual season so far of American Horror Story, and which ones were my favorite, which ones I didn't enjoy as much, and just kind of discuss them. Season 1, Murder House. I think it was a good intro into the universe. I mean, at the time, I absolutely loved it, and I think still to this day it stands up, and there's a lot of really good characters, and good scares and stuff like that. So yeah, I think overall is a good season. Yeah, moody teenage me loved Tate and Violet. Now looking back, pretty problematic and fucked up. You know. So oh yeah, so great creepy atmosphere. Just still this like the theme song from that season of the creepy like dripping sounds and it showing all the stuff in the basement, still one of my favorite American Horror Story intros ever. Yeah, great season. Season 2, Asylum. This is one I have not watched in a really, really long time. Actually, I don't think I've really watched it all the way through since it came out, which is kind of crazy to think about. I thought it was really well written, and like specifically obviously Sister Jude and Kit and a lot of the main characters in that season were really well written. I think I got lost a little bit with the aliens thing. Just kind of turned me off. Aliens aren't really my thing. There were some plot lines within that season that kind of just didn't seem that connected and necessary. I felt like it could have been a couple episodes shorter and it would have been a much better condensed story. Yeah, I think without some of the kind of like weird side characters, it would have been just like perfect. But like I said, I haven't watched it in a long time, so I should rewatch it and see how it stands up to this day. Season 3, Coven. So probably one of my favorite seasons overall. I think I would probably put this and season 9 as my top 2. I enjoy the seasons I think a lot more when they embrace the kind of just crazy, wacky, over the top, sometimes funny aspect of it instead of trying to be too dark and too scary. Yeah, I'm not sure why that is, but yeah, so I really enjoy Coven. There are definitely some moments in it that I'm not super fond of, or I think could have been done in a different way and better, which most of it is what I already addressed, is the gratuitous sexual violence. that I think could have been done in a different way, especially for such a season that overall is a lot of the time light and fun. I just think it was a lot. And so also, yeah, just some of the great characters, the whole just kind of world that they built with the witches and the voodoo priestess, and just everything was really fun, and the setting of New Orleans was beautiful and amazing, and it just felt perfect for it. The first season of Emma Roberts and obviously Madison Montgomery is iconic. Kathy Bates and Gabourey Sidibe, I think that's how you pronounce her name. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Their just dynamic duo was fucking amazing. Just, yeah, overall, I think it's one of the stronger seasons start to finish. It's not one of the ones that goes off the rails as much. Or when it does, it makes a little more sense. Some of them, it just is like, okay, what the fuck is going on now? Also, when this season came out, I was a teenager and I was Wiccan. I watched it as it was coming out, so I was a witch at the time. So it was like the perfect thing to come out at the time for me. I was just like, oh yeah, a bunch of female-led cast with a bunch of badass bitches who are witches. Oh yeah, badass witches. Yes, this was my shit when it came out, and I still enjoy it. I haven't watched it in a couple years, but I still think fondly of it. So season 4, Freak Show. I started watching the season as it came out and kind of got bored with it. I think like 3 or 4 episodes in, around the time that the was it Edward Mordrake, the guy who is like it's hard to describe, but you know, he comes and collects the freaks. I stopped around that time, which was unfortunate because it was right before they went into Twisty's backstory, which when I went back years later and rewatched the rest of this season, I loved Twisty's backstory. It was so heartbreaking. It was so sad. I think that part was really well done. Other than that, the second half of the season, I thought there were some good characters, but overall it kind of dragged for me. Dandy was definitely one of the most despisable characters in American Horror Story history. He was horrible, not to take that away, but yeah, just the second half where like Neil deGrasse Tyson came in and all this, it's just one of those ones where it just kind of got boring and lost me a little bit. Just wasn't as strong as like the first 3 seasons. So yeah, that's pretty much my thoughts of Freak Show. Just not that much. I mean, not bad, but not spectacular. Season 5, Hotel. I started watching this as it was coming out and watched the first episode and got to the scene with the addiction demon, and I don't think I even finished the episode. I was just like, nope, good, I'm done, bye, out. No, that was so intense and gnarly and just way too graphic and way too much. Like that, when I think of what I don't like about American Horror Story, that scene immediately fucking pops in my mind. It's just too much. Just too much. It's no. So yeah, so I stopped watching it. I don't think I even went back and finished it until I think I started season 6 and kind of liked where they were going so far, so I was like, okay, maybe I'll go back and watch season 5. But yeah, just not my cup of tea, and so I went back and finished it eventually and grew to like some of the characters. I liked Liz Taylor, I liked Kathy Bates' character. I mean, I don't like her, but like, excuse me, she was an interesting character. Sorry, but I just wasn't that interested in Lady Gaga's character. I mean, she was like working it and all that, but like story-wise, not that interesting. I think as a true crime junkie, the highlight of the season may be Devil's Night, the serial killer dinner. It's just like weird, like non-sexual serial killer fanfic. I don't know. Very bizarre, but also interesting. Season 6, Roanoke. When the first half of this season, where it was just kind of the story on its own, the haunting story, I actually really enjoyed it. It just was really a breath of fresh air and so nice after the last couple seasons where I had to stop because they were either boring or they were just too fucking much. it was nice to get back to like more of a simple ghost story, at least for the first half of the season. And I didn't hate the second half of the season like a lot of people did. I mean, I did not prefer it. I didn't like it as much as I liked the first half of the season, but I think overall the acting was good, and it was a much more simpler plot line with not as many crazy side storylines and all this. And none of the, at least not that I remember, nothing that sticks out, which is good. No super graphic sexual violence, which was nice for once. So yeah, that was kind of a welcome change of pace for me at the time. So I think maybe rewatching it, I wouldn't enjoy it as much as I did at the time, but at the time I was like, fucking thank God. Like, I could watch American Horror Story and just kind of enjoy it again. Season 7, Cult. So at this time, obviously, we all know this came out pretty much right after, not right after, but very, very soon after the 2016 election. And when I first heard, before I knew that it was going to be about the election, the cult theme, I was so excited because I'm a true crime junkie. I know a ton about a bunch of cults. Cults really, really, really fascinate me. So I was super excited to like see what they were going to do. And in some ways I was disappointed, but I think they did an overall good job of showing how people, I mean, honestly, it's not that realistic. There's so much more they could have done when it comes to like how people are indoctrinated into cults. It showed a little bit, but like it showed more of the after effects, not how people get into cults, which I think is kind of the scariest thing. But yeah, I mean, it was a good portrayal of how toxic masculinity can fester in these kind of groups. And just embolden each other. Yeah, it might have been that it hit too close to home for the time period, whereas I started rewatching it recently and I wasn't blown away, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's kind of a mediocre season, and it wasn't what I wanted out of the season. I think the part of like having the election be part of it was really interesting and could have been done really well, and I think there were parts that they did it really well, and it just went off the rails, and it just turned so wacky, and I don't know, it just was kind of a disappointment for me. I kept watching it throughout the season, but it's kind of like that with season 7 and season 8, where it just was like, I'm not really loving this, but I'm gonna keep watching, hoping it gets better. And there were moments in season 7 that I felt were good. Like, I thought, even if it didn't necessarily make as much sense with the storyline, like it did, but it kind of just felt like an excuse to have Evan Peters play all these different characters. I did enjoy the clips of Evan Peters playing all of these different cult leaders. I think it was fascinating to see him morph into all those different cult leaders, and I was familiar with all of them, so, well, with the exception of Andy Warhol, because I didn't know that he was thought of as a cult leader. Yeah, so that was interesting. And then, yeah, that was the season that had the whole weird Zodiac plotline where they like retconned Zodiac and said it was this group of feminists. That whole thing was just fucking bizarre. I mean, yeah, no. Ah, God, yeah. See, this is what I'm talking about. It just gets fucking weird, and yeah, that was bad. Season 8. We have to talk about season 8 even if we don't want to, right? So, season 8. Yeah, I had high hopes for Apocalypse, but it really turned into just Coven Part 2, and not a good one. And yeah, I think parts of the whole story with Michael Langdon was interesting, and the backstory with Jessica Lange, but like, I just wish they didn't call it Apocalypse, because they could have had the whole like storyline of Michael causing the apocalypse, but Apocalypse just built up such an expectation for me that it was going to be like disaster movies and all of these different, you know, apocalypse horror tropes built into one, and it was really just witches trying to stop the Antichrist. So maybe they should have named it American Horror Story Antichrist, and it would have been a lot more realistic. And then the apocalypse part would have actually been like a nice surprise for us in the beginning, but that's not what happened. Yeah, it just was so much, and it just went so off the rails, and there were great characters within it, you know, characters we already knew and loved. Michael Langdon, I think, was, even though I didn't always love that storyline, I think he was well acted and well built. The Warlocks, most of them were good characters. It just wasn't fun, and it wasn't really much that I straight up enjoyed about that season. Like, it just was like I said, watching every week, not really enjoying it that much, like not being pissed off enough or bored enough to like actually stop watching, but nothing that was like, holy fucking shit, that just happened, oh my god, like, yes bitch, like, you know, like the different reactions that usually American Horror Story gets out of me. It just was such a letdown. So from going from talking about those two really disappointing seasons, I was not expecting good things from 1984. Season 9, sorry, 1984. I was not excited at all. I was thinking this is gonna be just another bullshit season. They've gone off the rails the last couple seasons. It's not been good. I was not looking forward to it. I couldn't tell if I had like a smudge on my face or if it was the shadow of my nose. It was the shadow of my nose. Good to know. Yeah, so, and I personally am not a big fan of the 80s. I am not usually a big fan of like a lot of the movies or the music or the fashion or anything like that. So it's not like I was some big 80s nerd, but I was like, okay, well at least we're gonna get the 80s. But turns out this is my favorite fucking season. And that might be a very controversial opinion, but I fucking love season 9. Season 9 is the best season in my opinion. I mean, I'm not saying it like, I think maybe some of the earlier seasons, I don't know, but the one I enjoyed the most and upon rewatch just loved just as much as I did the first time, season 9, hands down. I feel like almost every character was built so well and was just so funny and fun to watch, or was heartbreaking and made you cry. There were characters that started off as villains and became heroes, and characters that started off as heroes and became villains. Like, it was just everything I wanted. It was campy and over the top and ridiculous, all while being sometimes freaky and sometimes emotional. It just was perfect. It was what American Horror Story is at its best. It is over the top and campy and ridiculous and horrific and gory, and that's what I fucking want from this show. I loved it so much. Like I mentioned earlier, the guy who plays Richard Ramirez is amazing. He just did so well. I'm spacing on his name, but the guy who played Richter was so good also. That storyline was so heartbreaking with his mom and his little brother who died, and then with his son eventually, like, so amazing. Obviously Billy Lord was amazing as Montana. Emma Watson was really great. I don't know the name of the actress who played Rita, but she was fucking amazing too. Her storyline was so amazing, and it just was like everything that I wanted. Especially after those last couple seasons, I was like, okay, thank you. I fucking love this. I was so excited every week to see what was gonna happen, and like, oh my god, how did I not mention Leslie Grossman's character? So good. When she's like going through and talking about all of her different true crime places that she owns and makes money off of, so fucking funny, so hilarious, like, so just yeah, just overall I think American Horror Story season 9 is just the best season because it's just so fun, and it's like there's really scary and creepy moments for the people who are scared by horror and all that, but they're just, overall it's just so fun and entertaining, and the characters are always fun to watch, and yeah, it was just really great. And they didn't go too far with the past season connections. They were very minor, and that's the way I like it with American Horror Story, where you kind of have to search for those connections. I don't want it like in my face, really. Like, those just always end up being kind of disappointing. You know, they did it a little bit better in the earlier seasons, where like the connection with Pepper to Asylum, like that was good, but like when we're having half the season or more just being taken up by past characters, it's not really a new fun season. It's just the same old thing. And if we wanted a series with sequels to previous seasons, we would be watching a series that is traditionally told, not an anthology. So, in my opinion. So overall, that is my thoughts of American Horror Story so far. I am curious to see what the next season has in store for us. I know a long time ago they were talking about season 10 being a cult or a Coven reboot. I really hope after season 8 that we had enough of that and we're not doing that anymore. Like I said, I love Coven, but like just leave it where it was. A lot of the time I feel like storylines and movies and series are like kind of ruined when you have to continue it and like try to continue telling the story when you could just tell a fresh and new story. That's why I love anthology series, because you can have the same kind of tones and themes like Haunting of Hill House and Haunting of Bly Manor did, where both emotional ghost stories that are much more than just ghost stories and are not really ghost stories at their core. They have ghosts in them but are just more stories about family or about love. And so there was very, very tiny connections between those two, and it was just the same kind of good writing and emotional storytelling about ghosts. Like that's what I want from an anthology series. I don't want it to be like, oh well, here are these characters you love and like let's just have a whole season with them. It's like, no, if we wanted that, we would have just wanted a sequel. That's not in horror movies. That's just historically, excuse me, horror sequels have historically not been great. So that's why the anthology series works well for horror TV shows. So, you know, like, get back to that like we did with season 9. That is my video on American Horror Story. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time. Thanks. Bye.